The great ship, the Resplendent Dawn, was broken. It drifted slowly away from the battlefield, a dark scar against the stars. Its smooth silver sides were now covered in black marks and deep cuts. One of its giant engines was completely dark and silent. Inside the ship, the lights flickered. A low red glow filled the hallways, signaling the ship was badly hurt. The air smelled of smoke and burned metal. Soldiers and crew members moved slowly, their faces tired and sad. They had just lost a big fight. On the main bridge, the mood was even worse. This was the command center of the entire Imperial fleet. Large screens showed images of space and the other ships flying with them. Many of these ships were also damaged. Some were being pulled by larger ships because they could not move on their own. In the middle of the bridge stood Empress Yuna. She was young to rule such a big empire, but she was known for her sharp mind. Right now, her face was like stone. She held her body very straight, her hands clenched into fists behind her back. She watched the screens, her eyes hard. They had run from the enemy. The thought was like a poison in her mind. The enemy was called the Devourers. They were not like people. They were a swarm, a hive of machines and living tissue that only sought to consume everything. They had swept through this part of the galaxy, destroying world after world. The Athelian hegemony, Yuna's empire, was the last great power standing in their way, and today they had failed. "Give me the final numbers," Yuna said. Her voice was cold and flat. An officer standing nearby, Commander Day, nodded. He was an older man, his hair streaked with gray. His uniform was perfect, but his shoulders were slumped with tiredness. "We lost 23 warships, Your Majesty. Another 40 are too damaged to fight without major repairs. We estimate the enemy lost less than 10 of their vessels." Yuna did not turn to look at him. "And their main fleet? Where is it now?" "It continues to move toward the core systems, Your Majesty. Our attack did not slow them down for long." A wave of hot anger washed over Yuna. She turned sharply, her long robe swirling around her. "Did not slow them down? We sacrificed our entire vanguard force. For what? A minor annoyance to them?" Her voice rose, echoing in the quiet bridge. The other crew members flinched and looked down at their stations, not wanting to attract her attention. Commander Day bowed his head. "We fought with honor, Majesty. Their technology, it adapts. Our weapons become less effective with every battle. Our strategies, they learn them too quickly. Is there nothing in this galaxy that can stand against them?" Yuna's question was a desperate shout. She swept her arm toward the main screen where the wreckage of her ships drifted. "No weapon? No strategy? Are we just waiting here to be eaten?" Her angry eyes scanned the bridge, looking at every face. She saw fear, exhaustion, and shame. She saw officers who had done everything by the book and still failed. Her gaze passed over them all, not really seeing them as people, only as parts of the machine that had broken. Her eyes fell on a man kneeling by a control panel near the wall. He was dressed in a simple gray engineer's uniform, different from the crisp blue uniforms of the bridge crew. He was focused on the open panel, his hands busy with tools and wires. He was just fixing a broken light on a console. Insignificant. Disposable. She didn't even know his name. He was just another human, a member of a species that had only recently joined the Empire and was not highly regarded. The man, Jin, heard the Empress's anger. He had been on the bridge for an hour, trying to repair a faulty communication line. He was a quiet man with a calm face and thoughtful eyes. He kept to himself and did his job well. As he worked, he also listened. He heard the reports. He saw the tactical data on the screens. He understood the problem. The Empire fought with power and discipline. The Devourers fought like a virus, changing and evolving. Fighting them the same way every time was like trying to stop a flood by building a higher wall. Eventually, the water would find a way through. He finished reconnecting the wire and the console lit up properly. He closed the panel and stood up. As the Empress finished her furious question, he turned. He saw the despair on the faces of the bridge crew. He saw the pride and fear on the Empress's face. He knew he should stay silent. He was nobody, but he had seen this before. The pride, the rigid thinking, the fall. "Perhaps a different approach is needed, Your Majesty," Jin said. His voice was not loud, but it was clear and calm in the tense silence. Every head turned to look at him. The lowly engineer had spoken to the Empress without permission. Yuna's eyes narrowed. She looked at him as if he were a bug that had just crawled onto her clean floor. "You are here to fix wires, not strategy," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Be silent." She did not wait for a reply. She did not ask who he was or what he meant. She simply turned her back on him. A complete and total dismissal. To her, he was not a person with an idea. He was a tool that had made a noise, and she had told it to be quiet. Jin did not argue. He did not get angry. He simply bowed his head slightly as was required and picked up his toolkit. But as he turned to leave, his eyes met those of Commander Day for a brief second. The commander had been watching. He had seen the man's calm demeanor. He had seen the look in Jin's eyes. It wasn't the fear of a junior crew member. It was something else, something old and knowing. And before Jin turned away, Day's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of the screen on the engineer's small diagnostic pad. It wasn't showing wiring diagrams. It was showing a star map of the Cygnus Abyss battlefield, and over the map were lines and symbols, forming a tactical pattern he had never seen before. It looked less like a battle plan and more like a beautiful, deadly piece of art. Jin walked off the bridge and into the hallway. The heavy door slid shut behind him, separating him from the command center. The sound of his footsteps was quiet on the metal floor. No one stopped him. No one asked him any questions. He was just the engineer. He walked back toward the engineering decks deep in the belly of the ship. Here the damage was more obvious. Crews were welding broken pipes and rerouting power cables. The air was hot and filled with the sound of machinery and shouted orders. Jin reached his small bunk room. It was just big enough for a bed and a small desk. He sat down at the desk and activated his personal data terminal. It was an old model, not like the shiny ones used by the officers. The screen glowed to life. It was not connected to the ship's main network. It operated on a completely separate hidden system. Files opened on the screen. They were not written in the common language of the Empire. The script was ancient and complex. There were star charts that were thousands of years old. There were biological readouts of the Devourers, with their weak points highlighted in a way Imperial science had never discovered. Jin leaned back in his chair, a deep tiredness in his bones. It was a tiredness that had nothing to do with the recent battle. It was the tiredness of centuries. He had tried. He had placed himself here on the flagship, hoping to offer small pieces of advice to guide them gently. But the Empress's pride was a wall he could not climb. She didn't want new ideas. She wanted her old ideas to work better. He looked at a small faded image on his desk. It was a drawing of a world he had not seen in a very, very long time. On the bridge, Empress Yuna had put the engineer completely out of her mind. He was less than a memory. She was now looking at the star charts pointing at a system. "We will make our stand here," she told Commander Day. "The Omicron Fortress. Its planetary defenses are the strongest in the sector. We will regroup there." Commander Day nodded. "A sound plan, Your Majesty." But in his mind, he was still thinking about the strange symbols on the engineer's screen. They didn't look like anything from the Imperial Academy. They looked like something from a myth, and he had a cold, sinking feeling that the Empress had just thrown away their only chance at survival without even knowing it. The silence on the resplendent dawn did not last. For 2 days, the ship moved through empty space. The crew worked hard to fix the damage. The mood was heavy. Everyone knew the Devourers were still out there. They were coming. Empress Yuna spent most of her time in the war room. She studied maps and reports. She met with her commanders over video screens. They all said the same thing. The enemy was too strong. Their fleet was too fast. Their weapons were too powerful. Yuna refused to accept it. "There must be a way," she said again and again. "We must find their weakness." But the report showed no weakness. The Devourers were like a force of nature, a flood, a storm. You could not reason with a storm. Jin, the engineer, returned to his normal work. He fixed power converters and checked oxygen levels. He spoke to no one about what happened on the bridge. He was quiet and did his job, but his eyes watched everything. He saw how the junior officers were afraid. He saw how the senior officers were stuck in their old ways of thinking. Yuna felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The Pale Wolf, a myth, a legend said to have disappeared 1,000 years ago. If he was real, and if he was on her ship, find him, she said again, her voice stronger this time. "I want that engineer brought to the bridge immediately." Across the ship, security teams moved quickly. They wore dark armor and carried stun rifles. Their orders were clear. Find the human engineer named Jin and escort him to the Empress. Do not harm him. The team leader, a serious woman named Sujin, led her squad into the engineering decks. The chief engineer looked surprised when they asked for Jin. Jin? He's a good worker, quiet, why do you want him? He is required by the Empress, Sujin said flatly. They found him in a small room near the main power core. He was not hiding. He was sitting at a monitoring station, watching the energy levels. He looked up calmly when the security team entered. He did not seem surprised. Engineer Jin, Sujin said. The Empress Yuna demands your presence on the bridge. Jin looked at them for a moment. Then he nodded. He stood up and turned off his station. He did not say a word. He followed them quietly. As they walked through the hallways, crew members stopped to watch. They whispered to each other. They had heard rumors. They knew something amazing had happened with the ship. Now they saw the quiet engineer being taken away by security. They wondered what he had done. Meanwhile, on the bridge, Admiral Su contacted them. His face appeared on the main screen. He was an old man, his face covered with lines. He had served the Empire for longer than Yuna had been alive. Your Majesty, Su said, his voice full of excitement. We have analyzed the battle data. The maneuvers your ship performed. They are impossible. The timing, the precision, no living pilot could have done it. It was the work of a master from another time. He leaned closer to the screen. There is a signature to it, a way of thinking. I have studied the old archives. This is the way the Pale Wolf fought. Is it possible? Has he returned? Yuna did not know what to say. The evidence was piling up. The impossible rescue, the ancient tactics, the quiet man she had dismissed. The door to the bridge slid open. Jin walked in, followed by the security team. He still wore his simple gray engineer's uniform. It was clean but looked old. He stood in the middle of the bridge, his hands at his sides. He looked at the Empress. He did not bow. The crew watched, holding their breath. This was the man who had saved them? This quiet, ordinary-looking man? Empress Yuna took a step forward. She looked at him properly for the first time. She saw his calm face. She saw his eyes. They were not the eyes of a low-level engineer. They were deep and old. They had seen things she could only imagine. Who are you? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent bridge. Jin looked back at her. He did not look away. You never asked before, he said. His voice was still calm, but there was a new strength in it. His words were like a slap. Yuna flinched. She remembered the scene clearly. Him speaking, her telling him to be silent, her turning her back. She had not even glanced at his file. He was nobody. Admiral Su was still on the screen. He was staring at Jin, his eyes were wide. By the stars, the old man whispered. It is you. The stories said you were tall. They said you had a quiet way about you. They said you looked like any other soldier until you started to fight. Jin glanced at the screen. A faint, sad smile touched his lips for a second. Stories get things wrong, Admiral. I was never tall. The admission hung in the air. He was not denying it. He was joking about it. Commander Day spoke, his voice full of awe. The Pale Wolf, the savior of the First Swarm War. The stories said you died. You sacrificed yourself to close the first Devourer rift. Jin looked back at Yuna. A story that suited me, he said. It is easier to hide when everyone thinks you are dead. He took a small step forward. The security team tightened their grip on their weapons, but he ignored them. I have waited, Jin said. His voice was louder now, filling the bridge. I hid, I watched. I hoped your empire would learn. I hoped you would grow wiser. But you did not. He looked around the bridge at the fancy screens and the proud officers. You grew proud. You grew rigid. You built bigger ships and bigger guns. You wrote manuals on how to fight. You created rules. The Devourers do not follow rules. They learn. They adapt. They are a storm. You cannot fight a storm with a rule book. He turned his gaze back to the Empress. I came here. To this ship. I took the job of an engineer. I thought if I was close, I could offer small pieces of advice. I could guide you. I tried to speak. You told me to be silent. The truth was a heavy weight on Yuna's shoulders. She felt dizzy. The myth, the legend, the savior of her civilization, had been on her ship for months. He had fixed the pipes and checked the wires, and she had treated him like a piece of furniture. She had been so sure of her own power, her own title, that she had been blind. She had ignored the one person who could have helped them from the start. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why did you not reveal yourself?" Jin's face was serious. "Would you have listened? A man from a lowly species claiming to be a 1,000-year-old myth? You would have thrown me in a prison cell, or a laboratory. I have seen it happen before. Pride makes people do foolish things. He was right." She knew he was right. She would never have believed him. "So what happens now?" Yuna asked. She felt like a child asking for direction. Jin looked at the main screen. It showed the star map. The Devourer fleet was already regrouping. Their moment of confusion was over. "Now," Jin said, "we stop talking about the past. We look to the future. They are coming again, and this time they will be ready for me." He walked over to an empty console. The officer sitting there quickly moved out of his way. Jin's fingers moved across the screen. He brought up a star map nobody recognized. It was not an Imperial map. It was older. It showed regions of space the Empire had never explored. "The war you are fighting is the wrong war," Jin said. "You are fighting the soldiers. I will show you how to fight the mind." He pointed to a location on the map, a dark empty spot between the stars. "That is where we are going. That is where this ends." Empress Yuna looked at the man she had dismissed. She looked at the ancient map. She looked at the faces of her crew full of new hope. She knew what she had to do. She straightened her back. She walked over to the command chair, but she did not sit in it. Instead, she turned to face Jin. "The hegemony is lost without you," she said. Her voice was clear and strong. She was swallowing her pride, and it was a bitter taste, but she did it for her people. "The command is yours." Every officer on the bridge stared in shock. An Empress was giving her authority to a common engineer, but Jin shook his head. "I do not want your chair," he said. "I never did." He entered a new set of coordinates into the navigation system. "I want your trust. I want your obedience. Tell your fleet to follow these coordinates. No questions." He looked at Yuna, his ancient eyes meeting her young ones. "The name is Jin, and we are not going to fight their war. We are going to end ours." The bridge was silent. The myth was no longer a myth. He was here, and he had a plan. The bridge was still. All eyes were on the engineer, Jin. He had not taken the command chair. He stood at the navigation console as if he had always belonged there. The Empress stood beside him, her face pale but determined. She had given him her authority. Now she had to trust him. Jin's fingers moved across the screen. He input a long sequence of numbers. A new course appeared on the main screen. It was not a direct path. It was a twisting, turning route that went through dense nebula clouds and past dead stars. "Helmsman, plot this course," Jin said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of command. The helmsman looked at the Empress. She gave a single sharp nod. "Do as he says." The great ship began to turn. Across the fleet, the other captains received the new orders. They were confused. The course made no sense. It led away from the core systems, away from the populated worlds. It led into the empty, dark parts of the galaxy. But the Empress had commanded it, and they had all seen the impossible rescue, so they followed. For 2 days, the fleet moved in silence. The usual chatter between ships was gone. Everyone was waiting, watching. Jin did not rest. He moved through the ship, but he was no longer fixing pipes. He went to the communication room. He went to the weapons control. He spoke with officers in a low voice. He gave them instructions that seemed strange. He told the communication team to listen for a specific type of signal. It was not a radio wave or a laser. It was a gravity pulse, a faint ripple in space itself. The officers did not understand how to listen for such a thing, but Jin showed them. He rewired their equipment with a skill that was far beyond any engineer. He knew the Omicron fortress was a trap. It was strong, yes, but it could not move. The Devourers would simply surround it. They would cut off its supplies. Then they would break it down piece by piece. It was a slow way to die, but a certain one. He tried one more time. He wrote a report. It was a simple suggestion. He proposed a different formation for the fleet. A loose, scattered pattern that could move quickly. He suggested they use the nebula clouds for cover. He did not say he was an expert. He wrote it as an idea from a low-level crew member. He sent the report to his superior. His superior read the first line, saw it was about battle tactics, and deleted it. "Stick to your pipes, Jin," the man said with a laugh. Jin did not get angry. He simply nodded. He had tried the gentle way. It had failed. Now he would wait. On the third day, the alarm sounded. It was a loud, blaring noise that filled the entire ship. Red lights flashed in every hallway. "They found us!" a voice shouted over the speakers. "All crew to battle stations!" The Devourer fleet had emerged from a nearby nebula. They had not followed the Empire's predicted path. They had come around the side. It was an ambush. On the bridge, chaos began. "Shields are failing on the right side," an officer yelled. "Their ships are moving too fast. I can't get a target lock." Empress Una stood in the center of it all. "Return fire. All batteries, fire at will." The resplendent dawn shook as its big guns fired. Bright lights flashed on the screens as the weapons hit the enemy ships. But it was not enough. The Devourer ships were small and fast. They moved like a swarm of insects. They surrounded the bigger Imperial ships. They fired their plasma weapons at weak points in the armor. One of the Imperial ships, the Brave Sword, exploded. A bright white light filled the main screen for a second. Then there was nothing left but pieces of metal. Una's face was pale. "Focus fire. Take out that lead ship." But the lead ship was already gone. It moved behind another one. The Devourers shared one mind. They did not need to talk. They acted as a single creature. Down in the engineering room, Jin worked. The room was hot and loud. The chief engineer was shouting orders. "More power to the engines. We need to turn the ship." Jin was at a station monitoring the ship's power core, but his hands were also on a separate small device he had connected to the console. It looked like a simple data drive. On its screen, lines of code were moving faster than any human could read. He was not just monitoring the power. He was watching the entire battle. He saw the positions of every ship. He saw the Devourer communication patterns. He saw their logic. He saw the trap closing. The Devourers were not trying to destroy the resplendent dawn yet. They were hurting it. They were pushing the entire Imperial fleet toward a gravity well. It was a region of space where the pull was very strong. A ship that went in might not come out. On the bridge they had not noticed yet. They were too busy fighting for their lives. "The Dauntless Will is taking heavy fire," Commander Day reported, his voice tight. "She's requesting support." Una looked at the screen. The Dauntless Will was one of their newest ships. It was commanded by her friend, Captain Mina. "Order the Star Fury to assist them." But it was too late. A group of Devourer ships broke through the defensive line. They slammed into the side of the Dauntless Will. They did not fire weapons. They attached themselves to the hull like metal leeches. Then they started cutting. On the main viewer, everyone on the bridge watched in horror. The Devourer ships were tearing the Dauntless Will apart with their own metal claws. They were pulling the big ship into pieces. Captain Mina's face appeared on the screen for a moment. Her face was calm. "For the Empire," she said. Then the screen went black. The Dauntless Will was gone. A terrible silence fell on the bridge. They had just lost one of their best ships and a great leader. It was then that Commander Day saw it on his navigation screen. "Your Majesty, our course, look," he pointed. The path of their retreat was clear on the map. The Devourers were pushing them directly toward the Calros gravity well. Una's eyes widened. She understood. They were not just losing a battle. They were being led to their total destruction. If they entered the gravity well, they would be stuck. They would be easy targets. The entire fleet would be lost. The Empire would have no defense left. "We have to change course," she yelled. "Now. Hard to port." The helmsman tried. "The ship won't respond. The engines are at maximum, but the gravity is too strong. We're being pulled in." Panic began to spread on the bridge. This was the end. Down in engineering, Jin saw it too. The gravity well was pulling them in. In 3 minutes, they would cross the point of no return. He looked at his small screen. He had a choice. Let them die, or reveal himself. He made his choice. His fingers flew across the keypad of his small device. He typed commands in a language no one had used for 1,000 years. On the bridge, the helmsman suddenly shouted, "I'm not doing that! The ship is moving on its own." The resplendent dawn began to turn. It was a smooth, sharp turn that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. The engines groaned in protest, but the ship obeyed. "What are you doing?" Una demanded, grabbing her chair to stay upright. "I'm not doing it," the helmsman repeated, his hands in the air. "The controls are locked." The ship completed its turn. It was now facing the gravity well, but moving sideways. Then the main thrusters fired at an angle no pilot would ever try. The ship started to slide away from the well's pull. Who is doing that? Yuna looked around the bridge, her eyes wild. Is that you, Day? Commander Day had his hands off his controls. No, Your Majesty. The commands. They're coming from inside the ship, he suddenly remembered. The engineer. The strange symbols on his pad. The calm look in his eyes. It's coming from engineering. But that was not all. The ship's weapon systems activated. The targeting computer locked on not to the closest enemy ships, but to a single, small devourer ship, far on the edge of the battle. It was a ship that looked no different from the others. The railguns fired. A single solid metal rod shot through space. It moved at incredible speed. It did not hit the ship it was aiming at. Instead, it shot straight past it. The railgun round hit a small, dead asteroid behind the devourer ship. The asteroid exploded into 1,000 pieces. The pieces flew out in a wide cloud. The cloud of rocks hit the small devourer ship from behind, destroying its engines. That ship drifted, helpless. It crashed into the ship next to it. That second ship, now damaged, spun out of control. It crashed into 2 more ships. Like a chain of falling stones, the accident spread through the devourer formation. In less than a minute, a whole section of the swarm was in chaos. They were crashing into each other. Their perfect formation was broken. The path out of the gravity well was now clear. The resplendent dawn slid through the opening, its impossible maneuver complete. The other Imperial ships, seeing the chance, followed it to safety. On the bridge, no one spoke. They just stared at the main screen. The Devourer fleet was in disarray. The Imperial fleet was escaping. The ship's controls suddenly beeped. The helmsman tentatively put his hands on them. I have control again. Empress Yuna stood perfectly still. Her mind was racing. What just happened? Who had saved them? That maneuver with the railgun. It wasn't just smart. It was beautiful. It was like using the enemy's own strength against them. It was a style of fighting she had never seen. Commander Day broke the silence. His voice was quiet, full of awe and fear. Your Majesty, in that shot. The way he used the asteroid as a weapon. The way he broke their formation without firing a single shot at their main hulls. He looked at Yuna, his face pale. I have only read about such a thing in the old stories. From the first Swarm War. The name of that war hung in the air. It was a legend, a myth from the beginning of the Empire, a hero who had vanished after saving them all. Yuna felt a cold shiver go down her spine. She looked toward the door where the quiet engineer had stood days ago. The man she had told to be silent. The man whose name she never asked. Find him, she whispered. Then her voice became strong, filled with a new kind of fear. Find that engineer. Now. The bridge was so quiet you could hear the hum of the ship's systems. Everyone was staring at the main screen. The Devourer fleet was a confused mess of ships drifting and crashing into each other. The Imperial fleet was moving away, safe for now. Empress Yuna stood frozen. Her mind was trying to understand what had just happened. Her ship, the Resplendent Dawn, had moved on its own. It had fought on its own. It had saved them all with a skill she had never seen. She turned to Commander Day. Her face was pale. The first Swarm War? That is just a children's story. Day shook his head slowly. He looked older than he had just minutes before. The stories are based on truth, Your Majesty. The hero of that war, the one they called the Pale Wolf, his tactics were like this. He did not fight with brute force. He used the enemy's strength against them. He used the environment. He saw the battlefield as a whole, not as separate fights. He pointed a shaking finger at the screen showing the damaged Devourer ships. That was not an accident. That was a calculated move. He did not attack their armor. He attacked their formation. Their unity is their strength. He broke it with one shot. He went to the engine room. He showed the chief engineer how to adjust the power output. He made the engines run quieter, with less of an energy signature. We are not hiding from their eyes, he explained. We are hiding from their sense of vibration. We must be a ghost in the water. The chief engineer, a man named Park, was skeptical, but he had also seen the ship move on its own. So he did as he was told. Empress Yuna watched it all. She followed Jin from room to room. She did not interrupt. She just observed. She saw how the crew, who had been confused and afraid, now moved with a new purpose. They looked at Jin with a kind of awe. They called him Sir without being told to. She felt a strange mix of emotions. She was relieved that someone was taking control. She was ashamed that it was not her. And she was deeply curious. Who was this man really? On the third day, she found him alone in a small observation room. He was staring out at the stars, his hands behind his back. He looked tired. More than tired. He looked ancient. "Can I ask you a question?" Yuna said. Her voice was soft. Jin did not turn around. "You are the Empress. You can do whatever you want. Why did you come back?" she asked. "If you wanted to hide, why join the fleet? You could have stayed hidden forever." Jin was quiet for a long time. He watched the stars drift by. "A storm is coming," he said finally. "A storm I thought I had stopped long ago. I could not watch from the shadows this time. I tried. But when I saw your pride, your certainty, I knew it would lead you all to death. And I could not let that happen again." "Again?" Yuna asked. He turned to look at her. His eyes were full of a memory so old it hurt to see. "The first time I fought them, it was not an empire I saved. It was a coalition, a group of species who had learned to work together. They were humble. They listened. We won, but at a great cost. I saw them all die. I saw worlds burn. I do not wish to see it again." He looked back out the window. "Your empire is proud. It thinks it owns the galaxy. That pride makes you blind. You see the Devourers as a problem to be solved with power. You do not see them as a part of a system, a cancer. To fight a cancer, you do not use a hammer. You use a precise knife," Yuna understood. Her pride had been her weakness. She had been so sure of her right to rule she had forgotten how to listen. Suddenly, an alarm beeped softly. It was not the battle alarm. It was a new sound, one that Jin had programmed. He turned from the window. "They have found the trail." On the bridge, the communication officer was excited. "Sir, we are detecting the gravity pulses. Just like you said. They are faint, but they are there." Jin went to the main screen. A map appeared. It showed their current position and a series of faint, pulsing dots behind them. The Devourer fleet was following them. They were moving exactly along the path Jin had chosen. "They are following us," Commander Day said, his voice worried. "You led them right to us." "No," Jin said. "I led them right where I want them." He zoomed out the map. Their twisting course was now forming a shape. It was a spiral. A wide, gentle spiral leading inward. "They are hive-minded," Jin explained to the bridge crew. "They think as one. They are efficient, but they are also predictable. They see a pattern and they follow it. I have given them a pattern to follow. A beautiful, irresistible pattern." He pointed to the center of the spiral. It was a dark, empty region on the map. "That is our destination. A place your charts call the Void of Kalros." Admiral Su's voice came over the speaker. He had been analyzing the data. "The Void? There is nothing there. No stars, no planets, no resources. It is a dead zone." "It is not dead," Jin said. "It is quiet, and it is the only place where we can speak without being overheard." "Speak?" Yuna asked, confused. "Speak to whom?" "To the mind," Jin said. "The single mind that controls all of them. The Nexus. You cannot kill the body to stop a hive. You must silence the voice that commands it." A new kind of fear filled the bridge. They had always thought of the Devourers as a swarm of animals. The idea of a single controlling intelligence was terrifying. "How do you know this?" Commander Day asked. "Because," Jin said, his voice very quiet. "I was there when it was born." The silence on the bridge was absolute. They all stared at him. The Pale Wolf was not just a hero from a war. He was a witness to the very beginning. "We do not have much time," Jin said, breaking the silence. "The spiral will lead them to the Void in 36 hours. We must be ready. We must prepare the weapon." "Weapon?" Yuna asked. "What weapon?" "We have no new weapons." Jin looked at her. For the first time she saw a deep sadness in his eyes. "Yes, we do," he said. "Me." He turned and walked off the bridge, leaving them all with the chilling weight of his words. The myth had returned not just to lead them, but to be their final weapon. And Empress Yuna finally understood that the man whose name she hadn't cared to learn was prepared to sacrifice everything for an empire that had already forgotten him. The Imperial fleet drifted at the edge of the Void of Kalros. It was a place of absolute nothingness. No stars, no light, no sound. It was the emptiest place in the galaxy. The ships hung in the darkness, their engines silent. They were waiting. Inside the resplendent dawn, the mood was heavy. Jin had spent the last hours in a small room near the communications array. He had connected his old data terminal directly to the ship's main computer. He was writing a program. It was not a weapon in the normal sense. It was a message. A very specific, dangerous message. Empress Yuna found him there. She stood in the doorway watching him work. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Strange symbols and equations filled the screen. He looked more tired than ever. "You said you were the weapon," Yuna said softly. "What did you mean?" Jin did not stop typing. "A long time ago when I fought the first swarm, I did not destroy them. I could not. They were too many. So I found another way. I found the mind that controlled them. The Nexus, I spoke to it." Yuna stepped into the room. "You spoke to it? How?" "I used a machine," Jin said. "A machine that could project my consciousness. My thoughts. I entered its mind. It was a sea of cold, hungry logic. There was no emotion. Only purpose. To consume. To grow." He finally paused and looked at her. "I could not reason with it. I could not destroy it. So I gave it a command. A single, powerful thought that I buried deep inside its code. I told it to sleep." He turned back to the screen. For 1,000 years it slept. The swarm became quiet, disorganized. They were still a danger, but without their mind, they were just animals. I thought it was enough. I hid. I thought the problem was solved. He pointed to the screen. But something woke it up. Your empire's expansion, perhaps. The noise of your engines. The vibrations of your warships. It stirred from its sleep. And it remembered. Now it is angry. And it is hunting for the one who put it to sleep. For me, Yuna understood now. The Devourers were not just attacking the Empire. They were coming for Jin, so this program, she began, is not a virus, Jin finished. It is a lullaby, the same one I used before. But the Nexus has learned. It has built defenses. It will not let me in so easily this time. To deliver the message, I have to get very close. I have to go to the center of the swarm. That is a suicide mission, Yuna said, her voice shaking. Jin gave a small, sad smile. It is a necessary one. One life for trillions. It is a simple calculation. Before Yuna could argue, an alarm sounded. It was a low, urgent tone. They are here, Jin said. On the bridge, the main screen came to life. At first there was nothing. Then at the far edge of the void, a pinprick of light appeared. Then another. And another. Soon thousands of lights filled the darkness. The entire Devourer fleet had arrived. They moved into the void, forming a perfect, terrifying sphere around the Imperial ships. They were trapped. There is no way out, Commander Day whispered. We do not need a way out, Jin said, walking onto the bridge. He went to the communication station. We need a way in. He entered the final commands into his data pad. The program was ready. Open a channel, Jin said. All frequencies. Maximum power. The communication officer looked nervous. Sir, they will hear us. They will know exactly where we are. That is the point, Jin said. I am calling it out. He took a deep breath. Then he began to speak. But he did not speak in the common language of the Empire. He spoke in a series of clicks and whirs and low hums. It was the language of the Devourers. It was the language of the Nexus. For a moment, nothing happened. The swarm continued to advance. Then, the ships in the center of the swarm began to move aside. They formed a tunnel, a path leading deep into the heart of the fleet. At the end of the tunnel, a ship began to emerge. It was different from the others. It was larger, much larger. It was shaped like a dark metal flower, its petals slowly unfolding. In its center was a pulsing red light, the Nexus, the mind of the swarm. A voice filled the bridge. It was not a sound you heard with your ears. It was a thought that appeared in your mind. It was cold and vast and hungry. You. The single word was filled with so much hate it made everyone shudder. You slept. You hid. We have grown. We have learned. You cannot trick us again. Jin stood straight, his eyes fixed on the giant ship. I am not here to trick you, he said, his mental voice calm and strong. I am here to finish what I started. We will consume you. We will consume your flesh. We will consume your thoughts. We will learn your secrets, and then we will consume your entire species. The Empire has nothing to do with this, Jin projected. This is between you and me. They harbored you. They are guilty. All will be consumed. Jin knew there was no more time for talking. He turned to Yuna. I have to go. I need a small, fast ship. No, Yuna said. There must be another way. We can fight! Jin shook his head. You cannot fight it. Your weapons are useless against its mind. This is the only way. He looked at her, and for a brief moment the ancient weariness was gone, replaced by a simple human resolve. A good ruler knows when to lead, he said, and a great ruler knows when to let someone else lead. You have learned this. Your people will need that wisdom. Before she could stop him, he turned and ran from the bridge. A few minutes later, a small scout ship launched from the belly of the resplendent dawn. It was a simple one-person vessel. It flew straight into the tunnel toward the waiting Nexus. On the bridge, everyone watched the small screen. They saw the scout ship fly bravely into the heart of the enemy. The Devourer ships closed the tunnel behind it. The small ship was gone, swallowed by the swarm. Inside the scout ship, Jin piloted calmly. He flew directly toward the pulsing red light of the Nexus. When he was close enough, he activated his program. A data stream, his lullaby, shot from his ship toward the Nexus. For a second, the red light flickered. The giant ship seemed to shudder. Then a powerful force grabbed the scout ship. Jin's screen showed his ship being pulled into the Nexus itself. The metal petals closed around him. He was inside the belly of the beast. On the bridge of the resplendent dawn, the main screen went dark. The connection to the scout ship was lost. Silence. Then the voice of the Nexus screamed in their minds. It was a sound of pure rage and confusion. What is this? What are you doing? The Devourer fleet began to move erratically. Ships started to drift. They bumped into each other. The perfect formation fell apart. The red light of the Nexus began to flash wildly, changing from red to white to blue. The code. The old code. It burns. The mental voice became weaker, more broken. Silence. We demand. Silence. Then there was a flash of pure white light from the center of the Nexus. It was so bright they had to look away from the screen. When the light faded, the Nexus was dark. The red light was gone. The giant ship drifted, dead and silent. All around it, the Devourer ship stopped moving. Their lights went out. They became just empty metal shells floating in the void. The single mind that controlled them was gone. The swarm was dead. On the bridge of the resplendent dawn, no one cheered. They stood in a silence full of respect and sorrow. Empress Yuna looked at the dark, dead Nexus. She thought of the quiet engineer who had fixed her consoles. The man she had dismissed. The myth who had given his life to save them all. He had not even asked for thanks. She turned to her crew. Their faces were full of relief, but also of shame. They had been saved by someone they had considered beneath them. We will go home, Yuna said, her voice clear and strong. And we will remember. We will remember that true strength is not in our titles or our ships. It is in our actions. It is in our willingness to listen. She looked one last time at the screen, at the place where Jin had made his final stand. And we will remember his name.